Good day. Thank you for joining. Welcome to Impact Media Presents. It is our 31st episode. I am Kelly Redmond, your host and Executive Director of Impact Media and Entertainment Coalition. It has been an exciting first week after our 7th anniversary. And let me tell you, today is no exception. We are going to be talking about solutions around equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as systemic change as it relates to community policing, public policy, and the entertainment industry. We are using the film Negative Exposure as our backdrop for the conversation today. And I'd like to introduce you to our guest from the film. I'd like to start with the creator, filmmaker, executive producer, Eric Davis.
Hello, Kelly. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to bring the cast members and the rest of our special guests on as well. We also have Rebecca. Dee Rienzo.
You got it.
Yes, we also have from the cast Charles Black. Let's give it up. We know that face.
That's Charles A. Black, and I am
Charles A. Black.
Right.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And we have a very special guest from California, joining with me from California, our state senator, Stephen Bradford. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's everyone today?
Good.
Great.
Great to meet you.
Great to see you. We also, although she has just got sworn in today and running a little bit behind, but we're really excited to have our newest deputy chief, Imada Tingarides, is going to be joining us in just a bit. But before we start our conversation, I'd like to start by showing the trailer of the movie. So everyone, let's take a peek at Negative Exposure.
We were slaves in the plantations, now we're slaves in the projects? Why'd you stop me?
Is this your vehicle?
Well, we can't drive our vehicles around here no more without getting pulled over.
Go ahead, fool.
Turn the neighborhoods into jungles.
Pull the trigger.
Live like animals.
Somebody's getting shot out here.
These people would just do the right thing.
They wouldn't have these issues.
You can't get involved with things like politics, poverty, race, or religion.
We stand here today as mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers of our young men.
Riots have broken out all across the nation.
We have to separate ourselves from this gangster element.
Doing justice and showing God's tender mercy begins with the preacher.
Woo! I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to it. Eric, you have to, we always start the show with why. We start with why. You have to tell us what compelled you and why did you make this film and why are you using this platform for this message?
Well, as a minister, obviously I encounter so many different issues in life. But one of the most challenging issues that I've seen is when we have these types of shootings, when we have these types of incidents, even the faith community doesn't know how to come together. We don't know how to have a discourse. We don't know how to talk about it. So we had a situation here in Columbia after the Trayvon Martin shooting. And now the concept has been in my head 8 to 10 years or more. But after the Trayvon Martin shooting, we had a shooting in Columbia, South Carolina that fortunately wasn't a fatal shooting. And it kind of touched me as a father because my son that you saw earlier, big guy, football playing, he was driving around that time. And as a father, you're kind of concerned that, your child could get, pulled over and anything could happen. So I went to a luncheon with a group of multicultural luncheon with a group of pastors, and I was just sharing as a father and the lack of empathy, the lack of ability to really identify with me. And they were honest about it. They were like, Eric, look, man, this is not in our wheelhouse. This doesn't happen in our community. Now, prior to that, our community always met all of us. but when it came to that issue, it wasn't our community. And so it challenged me because I realized if the faith leaders can't even see it, then how do we expect members in the community? So that's what the whole idea of flipping society and flipping the roles, but doing it from a faith context. I've seen other people try to do it, but it was kind of angry and vitriolic. You know, people, they were trying to, rather than deliver a message, they were trying to make a point. This movie delivers a message. It's not trying to make a point. And I think that the message ultimately is doing to others as you would have them do unto you. And then ultimately, it should create real discourse when people can then begin to see things from the other side.
I love it. Tell us a little bit about kind of the process as well as the purpose, you know, intended, and how you came to the idea of this flipped society.
Wow. I mean, like I said, the concept I had in my spirit when I was encountered with that, but the process was incredible because this process, believe it or not, started in October of last year when I met director. Yeah, it was fast. When I met director Tony Tite, as I mentioned to you earlier, I had a children's book series. He was recommended to me to come talk about an animated movie. So he came down, spent 2 days on my campus, and we were talking about the animated movie. And we were in the conference room, and it hit me because I was kind of holding my concept. And, you know, normally you wouldn't share it with a director, but I was letting my spirit to tell Tony that I had 2 movie concepts. And when I gave him those concepts and he heard negative exposure, he had just launched his network. And he said, listen, man, we need to shoot that movie right now. And it was October. So he went back to Atlanta 2 days later, sent me a contract and said, listen, I need you to write that movie. And then I wrote it. It took me 2 weeks, but everything I had going on took 2 weeks. I sent it to him. Took him about 5 weeks. We finished around November, Thanksgiving timeframe. Immediately started casting in Atlanta in December. Started casting in Columbia in January. Pulled a crew together. Started shooting February 10th, 22 days, not including weekends. We finished the week of the quarantine. Like literally,
wow.
Like as we were going into quarantine, we were going into editing. And then I had to actually build an editing suite in Columbia because all the editors were in Atlanta. And instead of going back and forth, we brought them in and brought 3 editors in, and man, 12 hours a day until we got it done. We were knocking it out. It was an incredible process.
That is incredible. And we know what it takes in California, don't we, Senator, to make a film, and to hear that they were able to do it that quickly. We need you to come and make some films in LA and California, right?
Hey, well, we're looking at
without a doubt.
Carolina's pretty good to us. Y'all are a little expensive out in LA.
Without a doubt. But we did the film tax credit a couple of years ago that I was a co-author of. So we're trying to make it more palatable, more affordable.
I'll have to throw your name around, Senator, if we come out that way.
Absolutely. Senator, I would like you to weigh in on how important it is to use this medium for change, because I know you're a believer in that.
It's incredible, and the timing couldn't be better. So I want to take my hat off to Mr. Davis, Ms. DiRenzo, Mr. Black for your talents. I don't think it could have been a better time. The convergence of all what's happening in this nation, and to have a product that's coming out right now that speaks to where we are as a nation, and to be able to use the entertainment platform is critical. For far too often, you see artists and athletes who kind of like just go along, get along, and happy to live in the $1 million homes and live in the suburbs and don't worry about the communities no more. But to have projects like this that tell our story daily of what's impacting our lives. And I just saw the trailer, man, and it almost brought me to tears, because that's the discussion we have on a regular basis with our white colleagues as to what's the difference in society. And they think it's no difference, but it's a stark difference. And then just to hear our Attorney General just yesterday say there's no difference, there's no racism in the policing in this country, even though the data supports it. I don't believe it's racism that shows the statistical bias in Black and brown people not only being arrested but killed. So I want to commend you for this tremendous product and using your voice, using this platform, like projects like 13, When They See Us, Just Mercy. It tells the real stories that have gone too long without being heard. So thank you.
And thank you for weighing in, Steve. I'd like to hear from Rebecca and Charles. Let's start with Charles. Why was it important for you to be in this film? Why did you choose to do it?
Well, You heard the man say he wrote it in 2 weeks and he filmed it in 22 days. That does not happen in the real
Yes.
world. So, don't let anybody get the notion you can do that because that was impossible. But it's a very powerful message in this film, and it's one that's going to get your attention. You're going to see the pain and anguish of a mother,
Yes.
about her son, and Rebecca shows that pain and anguish at such a deep level that you cannot help but feel it yourself, and you'll forget about the colors and anything else. You'll be seeing the anguish of a mother about her son. This movie is going to make you reflect a lot, and I've
Yes.
been doing a lot of reflecting myself since doing the movie. One, as the bishop said, the filming ended right at the time of quarantining for the pandemic, and I was sitting in the breakfast room of the hotel in Columbia, South Carolina, and a family of Asian folk came in, and I found myself recoiling from them because of all the talk that this thing came from China. They may have been Korean for all I knew. I don't know. But I found that I was pulling upon some prejudice of my own. And we all have them in various shades and colors and fashions. But the other thing I've been reflecting about in the past few days is the whole notion of peace. And I thought about it in three different ways. One, that Jesus, for example, was the Prince of Peace, but in Matthew 10:34, he says that I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. And that's kind of conflicting for us to think about. Prince of Peace, he didn't come to bring peace. And it occurs to me that the message was that he was not bringing peace, he had to come and establish peace, okay, in a world that had no peace. Because peace, one definition that I like about peace is that it is a societal concept of harmony and friendship in the absence of hostility and violence. Okay, so when you hear picketers saying "no justice, no peace," it's a double message. One is, you're not going to have any peace if we don't get some justice. But the deeper meaning is that there can be no peace without justice. If you're going to have a lasting, real, enduring peace, it has to involve justice. And at some point, you have to have a détente that gets rid of the violence and the hostilities to bring people to a table to establish a peace. And that's the kind of reflecting that this movie will make you do. You may not deal with it the same way I did, but you're going to do some thinking.
Now, thank you, Charles. Rebecca, tell us why you did this film, and then tell us a little bit about your character too.
Well, my character is Beverly Gresham, and she's raising a son in the projects and trying to keep him on the straight and narrow road. And when I heard about this movie and read the script, I was just like, this is for me. This is me. This is me. I have been preparing for this, or I should say the Lord has prepared me for this for years, because I moved to New York City and married a man who was a youth pastor to inner city youth. And we lived among the people that we ministered to for several years. And that included having crack dealers sitting on my stoop when I would go out to go to work. Or, we had gunshots every single night there in Brooklyn. And I had a baby boy, and then I had another baby boy while I was in that ministry. And just having these two little babies with me in that neighborhood, in that atmosphere. Now, there were a lot of wonderful people there, but there was also an element that made you very fearful for your children. But as far as the regular people, I went to the laundromat, and we're both trying to keep our babies off the floor and from eating something on the floor while we're doing our laundry. And I just thought, this is my background. So when I read the script, I was like, oh Lord, I said, I've got to do this.
So glad to hear that. I understand that creating empathy was one of the goals of the film. Since we haven't seen it, tell us a little bit about how you achieved that through the film.
Now, it's kind of, without giving it away, I mean, there are a lot of twists and turns in this movie. This is going to be, first of all, it's like Charles said, it's a very cerebral movie, first and foremost. But then it's going to touch the heart, because you have to ride this movie till the end. And if you ride this movie till the end, there's no way that you won't be touched with the feeling of empathy. That's the design of it. It's designed to bring us to a conclusion. And that conclusion, like Charles was saying also, is not only about our world around us, but a conclusion about ourselves. And I think that what some people are going to do is discover the lack of empathy, the maybe even apathetic attitude that they've had, toward everything that's going on. Because the movie doesn't only deal with racism, it deals with some other isms too, classism, elitism. It deals with a lot of things that the church typically tries to avoid in movies. One of the things that we do, I call it Hallmark movies. We do these very kind of cute utopian movies where they kind of a sidestep from real society. They deal with miracles and they deal with relationships, but they don't deal with the broader society. This movie doesn't do that. The dialogue in this movie, and I'm not talking about from a standpoint that is going to be offensive, but it's very honest. Now, if you're living a lie, it'll offend you, but it's being done in a way that the truth is raised, the nap is raised on everything, and then it kind of holds up a mirror where we all have to look at ourselves. So I think that from the empathy standpoint, it's just, you're gonna fall in love with these characters. One of the things I have to say about these actors, both Charles, they're experienced, accomplished actors. You've probably seen Charles in more movies, from Contagion to Best of Enemies and all of these kinds of things. He's all over the place. And I didn't really discover that until after we did the movie. And then I see Charles' face pop. I'm like, well, good God, what movie isn't he in, right? But then Rebecca is going to do something in this movie that I think will be award worthy. She's going to make America feel the plight of the African-American woman that has lost her son. And she does it in such a way that I had to ask her, I said, you're not, we're all spiritual, but I said, you're channeling this from something, because you're not, this is coming from a deeper place. And you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that in this movie. You really are.
And what do you see? How do you see the movie? Well, let me rephrase this. What does a more empathetic society look like to you? And I'd like to open that up to others to share, but let's start with you, Eric.
So, I mean, a more empathetic society is when we don't politicize a very personal issue. A more empathetic society is when we as a parent can sympathize with that that's somebody's child laying on the ground, no matter what age. And so when you're empathetic, you don't immediately draw these hard lines without even knowing the facts, because the movie even deals with that kind of thing, where you first empathize with the loss of life. You empathize with what has happened, and then you kind of fall in, but that, fall into what the facts are. But the first thing is we all have to do it. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, but we see these people on the news every day that really become statistics. But these are people.
Yes.
These are people. And until it happens to us, and because I'm in that role as a pastor, I'm in the hospitals when there is a death, when there is sickness, when there is pain in somebody's life. So you don't have a choice but to empathize. But when you see how callous we become as a society, they did something, because we watch so much murder and death on television, that they actually showed, I remember years ago, maybe over a decade ago, they showed an actual murder. So what happens, because we see it on television so much, and we've been numbed and made so callous, that when we saw the murder on television, just like these kids on video games, it wasn't real to us. So now we have to be brought back to reality, which means that we have to be brought back to compassion, and we have to literally be brought back to feeling. And so that's what the movie will do that.
And some other examples of kind of creating, kind of flipping the script, as you call it, that flip society. Jane Elliott did the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment decades ago. And also my mentor, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, when he did his race awareness workshop, he did that in his workshop. That was kind of the premise behind it. He allowed white people to experience what it feels like to be Black in a room. And going through that workshop when I was a junior in college changed my life. And he said, you're going to do this. And he said, you want to do this? And I said, I do. He said, you will. and I did, and we're still mourning the loss of him.
Yeah,
I'm just so glad.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in and throw something when you finish that. There's a thought came to mind that I want, because I don't want this to be lopsided. My character, which I didn't intend to act in this movie at all, but director Tyke saw me preach one Sunday and said, "Man, you're an actor. You need to come be in this movie." And I'm like, no. And so he convinced me. But the character, Pastor Robert Kingsley, is a very affluent, privileged character. So he represents the upper echelon and the elite. And to watch the experience that he goes through over the course of this movie, I think that is going to cause a lot of people to look and say, wow, is that me? Because in a very real way, we bring, that aspect. So it's not just the urban side. We bring that suburban elite side to the forefront as well. Privilege is what it really is.
That's neat. And I'd like Charles to tell us about his character a little bit before we transition into our discussion. And we'll formally introduce our deputy chief who's joined us when we start that segment. Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
My character is a photographer, and the title of the movie has a lot to do with his work because he helps to solve a crime in the darkroom when he develops a negative. Okay. And the character is always on the scene of police action. And if somebody is shot, he's there taking pictures and like. I was talking a minute ago before the deputy chief came on about peace and the role that Jesus had in peace and what the message is from the protesters. But the third leg of that was that police officers are called peace officers.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about that very much, but they don't come on the scene because there is peace. But sometimes they have to come to help establish or reestablish peace. And that is often lost in the execution of duties by some. I found that all too often, folk who are policemen should not be policemen. So the problem is not just in the lack of proper training, but in the lack of proper recruitment and screening, so that you're getting an officer who has the right temperament and the right sociological and psychological profile to do the job. And the other part of it is police are often policing a community from which they do not come.
I'm familiar.
So that they are not welcomed by the people they're policing, and the people who they're policing don't know them, and they view them as an occupying force, and they are afraid of the people because they don't know them and because of all the stereotypes about how big and bad about all of us black folk are. So therein is conflict, automatic conflict. But like Jesus came with a sword to help establish peace, we give police officers guns and billy sticks and all that sort of thing. But they have to be used judiciously because the policeman cannot be judge, jury, and executioner. That simply doesn't work. But anyhow, I think about all that stuff in relation to this movie, because all of those things will come to your mind when you're viewing it, and you will begin to empathize across your racial and religious lines when you see the pathos in this movie.
Thank you. And that is the perfect segue to our conversation around community policing and public policy. And to start off, let's give a big hand to our new deputy chief who was just sworn in today. Deputy Chief Imada Tingarides.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We are so excited to have you in this role. Thank you for serving in this capacity.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So before you get started and we talk about community policing, I would love for you to share your reaction to the trailer, because you did get a chance to see it. So please tell the cast and Eric your thoughts and the viewers as well, and why this type of film is so important, especially for such a time as this.
Yes, and again, thank you for having me, and sorry for the tardiness. I appreciate your patience.
You got sworn in today. I mean, come on. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. I have to tell you, when Kelly sent me the link, I had to watch it 3 times. And it's a 2-minute and I think 27-second link. And I said, wait a minute, are those white guys saying that they live in the public housing development, or what in the movie they said the projects?
Mm-hmm.
So I rewinded again, and then I said, yeah, that's what they said. Then I rewinded again, and I said, wow, what a compelling idea, to get people to really stop and think and process, and look at something from a different lens. And so I think the first thing I thought was, wow, this is really going to allow people to self-examine and think about how they um, perform or how they view other people, and really ask themselves, do they have implicit biases? A self-check, a self-check. So I think that's what came to mind first. Second, I thought, brilliant. How brilliant is that? I've never seen a movie done like that, where you've been asked to identify with someone other than yourself to try to make a point. And then third, I thought, I gotta watch this. I can't wait till it comes out. So kudos to the 2 minutes that I did see. And it's so critical at this time, in this juncture, with everything going on across the country, that this dialogue occurs, and that we step outside of ourselves to really look at this and talk about this. And tonight I've heard a lot of talk about empathy and compassion, and really the role that I'm in now is about building relationships and trust policing and truth and reconciliation through having that compassion and understanding for cultures and communities.
That's good. That's good.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more about your goals in that role, Imada.
So I am definitely humbled and blessed. I am the second person in the history of the LAPD to be promoted from a captain to a deputy chief. And I'm the second African-American deputy chief and the female deputy chief in the history of the LAPD. So that alone is just historical and is a testament to the moment that we're in. And I'm very humbled, and I don't take it lightly. And from my perspective, it is a big responsibility for young girls and young Black girls who grew up in the community like I did, to see that these type of things can be accomplished, that you can grow up and come from South Los Angeles and have a career in law enforcement and choose to give back to your community. My role is basically standing up this bureau for a program that started in 2011 under the guise of Connie Rice, who really believed that law enforcement needed to police in communities of color different. And so this community safety partnership program is just that, working in communities that have had a past mistrust, a historical torn relationship with law enforcement, and working on truth and reconciliation to change that narrative and build bridges so that we can address the quality of life issues and the concerns in some of our most vulnerable communities. So my role will be to just do that. As a deputy chief overseeing this new bureau, I will have oversight in how our officers engage in the community and work alongside the community to make true change, and building that relationship and getting that forgiveness has an impact on crime. We've seen a reduction in violent crime in some of these communities that this CSP program is in. And if having that dialogue and being able to trust one another has a reduction in decreasing the incidence of crime and fear in the community, then listening and having compassion and empathy is really the answer to policing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Captain Ann Young felt that you should be a part of these conversations I've been having. And I'm so grateful to her, your mentor, who connected us so that you could be here. And you told me that it's important for you to be involved in these conversations. Tell everyone why you believe that.
It's so important. It has always been important. But right now, it is key. There's such a divide going on across our country right now. It's painful. It hurts, but it's reality. And what we do now in this moment is key to what we look like 10 to 15 years from now. And we have to have this dialogue and be part of the conversation. There's dialogue around defunding law enforcement and defunding the police. And I will tell you that I think that you need the police. There are times when we have to respond to critical incidents and violent crime, and police presence needs to be there. I do believe that there should be a reallocation of funding and resources that should go back out into the community that can address and help with our social system, our probation system, our reentry system. There's no reason why someone should come out of prison and not be able to get a driver's license or a job. And if we can't provide that for someone, then they're going to go back into that vicious cycle. So there should be an allocation of resources and funding to provide a platform so that individuals can be successful as they move throughout society and live and work in our communities. And so I think that during this divide, we have to come up with solutions. We have to look at what the community needs to heal themselves. We have to look at the trauma and the stress in the communities. And that can't be law enforcement doing all of those things.
Yes. Is there anything that those of us here on the screen can do to support, as well as the citizens at large, locally, nationally? What can we do to support you and others like you in your role across the country?
I think what's so important, and I think Charles Black, Mr. Black, you said it best. You said we were peace officers. And I think that people need to remember that we have to humanize. I have 6 children. I get up and brush my teeth in the morning. I'm just as human as everybody else in this chat room. And I think that Eric Davis said it the best, and he talked about being a preacher, and he's not an actor, but your voice, what you're doing, the message that you're able to send out to masses is so key and critical at this time. So I think having forums like this where I'm allowed to come in and speak freely and speak from the heart and not be judged, having the willingness to understand one another. I think right now accountability is huge. We need the community to hold law enforcement accountable. And at the same time, law enforcement needs to be able to hold the community accountable. So I think what I would need in order to be successful in changing this narrative is just simply sitting at a table. Let's have some discussions. Let's be respectful of one another, even if we don't agree with one another. And we have to stay woke.
Yes.
We have to stay woke, but let's stay woke, but have positive conversation as we address some of these critical concerns and issues.
Absolutely. And on that note, I've got to get Senator Stephen Bradford into this conversation. We thank you, Senator, for serving not only as a state senator, but as regional vice chair of the National Council of Black State Legislators. So thank you for your leadership. I know that you have a lot to say on these things that we are discussing, and we would love for you to share an update on the status of SB 731. Charles mentioned what you've been working on. He said some people should not be police officers, right? This is what this bill deals with. So tell us a little bit about that. There was a little disappointment earlier in the week, but give us an update and let us know what we need to do to undergird you moving this forward.
First, let me say congratulations to Deputy Chief Tangarides.
Yes.
I couldn't feel better about someone who I've watched. I think I first met you as a sergeant, and I've seen her work her way through this department, and she does this job with such compassion and empathy, as we stated, and commitment to the community. So let me say congratulations.
Thank you.
I look forward to our continued working relationship. Yes, I authored SB 731, which was police decertification. And unfortunately, midnight on Monday, it didn't get a vote in the California State Assembly. California is currently one of only 5 states that doesn't have a decertification process. And as the chief stated, many people are talking about defunding the police. I'm not an advocate of that. I truly believe, as the chief stated, we need police, but we need a way to get rid of bad police, because I have plenty of friends, from the late Kenny Gardner with LAPD to one of my childhood friends who just retired, Michael Brox, after 35 years on LAPD. They're great people, men and women, that put on that uniform every day. But we have to admit, there are bad actors. There are bad politicians. There are bad teachers. There are bad doctors. There are bad lawyers. So we have to believe that there are bad police officers as well. And what SB 31 did, which create a transparent, accountable method of getting rid of bad police officers by setting up a independent review panel, along with working jointly with Post, keeping law enforcement directly involved with this process. But at the last minute, the power of the union, as we all know, got to a bunch of our colleagues, and they kind of blinked at the last minute. But I think if we're going to build that trust, as the deputy chief stated, it has to be both sides. It has to be a two-way street. It just can't always be favoring law enforcement, because again, this was not a gotcha measure by no stretch of the imagination. We want police to work, but we want police to work the same way in our communities as they do in the suburbs and more affluent communities. We want crime suppression, but what we get often is community oppression. And most of that oppression is by bad officers who come in and crackheads and, falsely arrest, create a gang database that you can't get off for life, simply because you live in the projects and you can't leave that neighborhood, or you associate with your relative where you live with who happens to be a gang member, and now you're classified as a gang member. So SB 731 was just a way to get rid of the bad apples, and that's in law enforcement, and we all know they exist. Just using the police department in Vallejo. In Vallejo, a small police department compared to LA, in the last 10 years, they've had 19 killings of unarmed individuals. 19. Now, you tell me where, if it was in a white community and 19 people were killed, you would not be talking about defunding the police. You'll be talking about banning police altogether. So I'm so encouraged by this movie, because it gives that example of what I've often said. Not until you walk in my Ferragamos will you know what I go through every day. And as a Black man, and I chaired the select committee on boys and men of color when I was in the assembly. And I remember we had a hearing on police interaction with Black and brown communities. And I'll never forget this police chief in Northern California. I can't recall his name, but someone asked, what was the toughest job or situation he had to deal with as a police chief? And he sat there for a minute and his eyes welled up with tears. And he says, when my son turned 16, I had to have that talk. The police chief happened to be Black. And he says, my colleagues don't know anything about that. They have never had to sit down and say, not if you're going to be stopped, but when you're stopped, here's what you need to do. And it's a shame still in society in 2020, Black and brown people are still having that conversation with not only African-American and Latino men, but young ladies as well. So our goal as legislators is try to make a shift in how we perceive law enforcement. Again, we're all supportive of having good law enforcement, but we have to admit there's bad police officers out there, and we need a method of getting rid of them.
So, Steve, you shared with me that there's been a groundswell of support, especially from entertainers and athletes. Tell us about that after what happened earlier in the week.
Well, even before it happened, let me take my hat off to Aloe Black, a talented musician who's been on board on this from day one, texting, calling, writing, emailing, getting people on board. I mean, interrupting recording sessions to stay engaged and have chats just like this with the advocates of this SB 731, Kyle Kuzma from the Lakers, Chelsea Handler, Mariah Carey, Robert De Niro. I mean, come on, Robert De Niro's on board with this bill. So we appreciate you talked about earlier about using your platform and using movies such as this. I appreciate those athletes and entertainers who are using the power of their voice. For LeBron James last week to say, as a black man, I fear the police. As black women and black children fear the police. Look at Mr. Blake's kids. Will they ever trust the police? I mean, for kids under 10 years old to see their father shot 7 times in the back, will they ever trust the police? That scar that will stay with these kids forever. So, you know, we need projects like this to flip the script, so to speak, so people see what black and brown people experience every day. It's not make believe. I like to quote Richard Pryor all the time. He used to have a routine about being caught cheating. And he says, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? Well, that's what America has had us to believe all these years, that we were lying when we talked about the encounters that we had with law enforcement. But now with ubiquitous cell phones and videos, they realize we're not lying. We're seeing black and brown people being executed for no reason other than they ran. They look suspicious. And again, if my Caucasian brothers and sisters were being killed at the same rate, you were saying, let's get rid of police altogether.
So what pressure can we put on your colleagues to continue to move, if not this bill, some other similar bill forward? What needs to be done from here?
First, we need to vote. Let's make sure we vote in November. Vote all the time when there's elections, especially on local elections. Many times they talk about just the presidential election. I hear far too many people only vote for presidential elections. They're all important, but I tell you, your local elections are far more important, because that's where you elect your DAs, that's where you elect your school boards, that's where you elect your city council and your mayors who implement these programs. But what we need to do is continue to apply pressure on the California legislature. I would ask you to continue to write, email, tweet, and say, we want SB 731 to pass. We're going to bring the bill back at the beginning of the legislative session next year. We've already put out a press release today from leaders of both houses. Both the Speaker and the Senate President Pro Tem has stated this will be a priority, along with the Black Caucus, where I serve as the vice chair, to make sure this legislation moves forward. But we need your voices. We need you guys to stand behind us and reach your platform, your audience, and just say how important decertification is and police reform is right now at this time in this nation.
Absolutely. And we also need to put pressure on our federal legislators,
without a doubt,
who on the George Floyd Community Policing Act as well, that we're still trying to push through. So thank you so much. And Eric, when you created this film, I know that you had a public policy agenda and in partnership. So tell us a little bit, about the movement that you're creating around this film and public policy.
Well, I think it can work in tandem with SB 731. Let me start by saying let me get it right, Amada Tingarides, right?
Yes.
Now, I want you to know that I bishop 17 churches, 11 of them are in Africa. And I don't know if you've ever been to Ghana, but you have some sisters and brothers in Ghana, West Africa, man. When I saw you, look like the beautiful people over there. So congratulations to that. Yeah. I want to say that Senator Bradford, I was going to comment on you sending that pink coat to me or whatever color it is, but since you're going to be sending the coat, you can send the Ferragamos too. I'll take
right.
If you're size 9, you can have them.
Well, 9.5 then, but anyway. So as it relates to the Jason resolution, Jason is spelled with a Y, Jason. It felt my spirit almost at the end of the movie, when we were at the end of the production of the movie. I felt there needed to be a call to action. This movie needed to lead to something else. So I came up with this fictional concept of the Jason bill, and it stands for Just As Your Son. And in the movie, this bill is, well, I don't want to talk about it, but it's a bill that's birthed out of the movie. Well, Senator Bradford's colleague, Gilda Cobb Hunter, who is the president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, got wind of it and actually have now turned it into an actual resolution. So it's a national resolution, 48 states, 3 territories. And I want to quickly talk about it because everything they were saying is true. I served on Community Advisory Board, Citizens Advisory Board for the police department here. Our church is heavily into outreach. We basically are a very large mega outreach church. It started with 30 people. At one point, they called us the Thug Church because we were delivering so many gangsters and thugs that they were getting cleaned up. Now our church is 50% male, which is an incredible statistic, and we have more credibility in the street, in the prisons. Guy once told a story, and I'm gonna make this brief. His last name was Davis, and typically when guys go to prison, they have to join with the Muslim faith to stay safe. But he told everybody he was my cousin. And so as a result, he got a pass the whole time he was in jail because he was Mr. Davis's cousin. So we have a lot of credibility, both with the police and with the street. So Gilda Cobb and those guys asked me to put together this resolution. So I came up with a 7-point approach that really is just from a community level, just kind of a common sense approach. And it's an acronym that spells RESCUE with 2 E's. And R stands for representative policing. And we looked at the Ferguson effect where 100% community, Black community was being policed by 97% Caucasian. And it was just like you said, it's a recipe for disaster. E is for evaluative hiring. I don't think we only need to do psychological evaluations. We need to do personality evaluations. So we don't want to put the deer hunting white guy in an urban community. I mean, put him where he best can serve. We need to do social development. We trust that these guys are coming out of high school. Some never go to college, and that's okay. But do you really understand civics? Do you understand how government works? That a police officer is not only a public servant, you're an employee of the citizens. And so they have to understand that. Community adaptability, Barney and Mayberry, he creates more problems than he solves because he has a city mentality in a rural environment. So there has to be community adaptability, even if you don't look like a community. The core of this resolution is uniform standards. I know in our city, there are 5, 6 municipalities that don't police alike. So the citizen is driving amidst all of these, which was the case in Ferguson, but you're asking too much of the citizens to understand the policing and all of that. So there needs to be uniform standards where at the base level, everybody does the same thing, which also goes to de-escalation tactics and everything else. And then there needs to be an enforcement rubric for police officers. When they commit an infraction, there needs to be a clearly defined way that you enforce the law with the peace officer, so to speak. And then empathy measurements. I think that goes both ways, that we have to have empathy for the police in trying to do their job. But if you're there to serve as well as protect, you can't serve without empathy. So the way some of these situations escalate, it's because of the lack of empathy for the people that they're serving. So there have to be measurements for that. And having sat on the board, I gained a lot of appreciation for the police, because it's one thing when you hear and see a clip on the news, but it's another thing when you're sitting there and you're watching the police running through the alley, trying to, arrest someone, and then you see all of everything that goes on. So we have to have a more balanced approach to our whole perspective of it all. And so that's what the Jason resolution is about. It's community and police reform, not one, because somebody said it earlier, you can't have one without the other. Now, Charles kept talking about peace, and I'm done with this. But in the Bible, the Greek word for prosperity is irene, but the meaning of it is peace. So scripturally, you can't have prosperity without peace. So America touts itself as being one of the most prosperous nations in the world. But is that true if you don't have peace in the nation? So I think that now it's time to bring true prosperity to the nation by bringing real peace to the country.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Eric. I absolutely love that. I'd like to give Steve and Imada a chance if they have any reactions or questions to that.
I think hit the nail on the head. I mean, and we need people with that kind of vision in law enforcement. We need people with that kind of vision in elected office. I mean, because that's what we're trying to solve here, but we come with all our implicit and explicit biases, and we need to shed all of that and listen to that message that Mr. Davis has just poured out. I mean, that's beautiful, of what we're trying to achieve many times as some legislators, not all, and some law enforcement, not all, but I think it's clearly where we need to be as a society, as a state, as a nation. So I thank you for your vision, and I look forward, if I can work with you in anything moving forward, I look forward to doing that.
It's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Amada, did you have something you wanted to comment on or ask a question about?
I was trying to write down every little thing that Eric.
I know.
We're going to stay connected. Don't worry. When this is not just entertainment, this is actually, these are work groups that I'm putting together. These are action coalitions. So there's work to be done beyond this conversation, and we're going to continue that. So, and we're going to stay connected. So we're going to make sure of that.
So the senator will have the resolution. It's been ratified through the caucus. So you should be receiving the resolution to pass on to the deputy chief. We want this to be, let me add this. I'm sorry, I really should have said this. So the caucus is trying to do a 100,000 youth and young adult summit, virtual summit. It's a little aggressive. They're trying to do it this month. They're using the movie as the central part of it, where all the kids watch and young adults watch it. But all of this, the discussion is centered around the Jason resolution, the movie, and all those aspects of it. So we're looking for corporate sponsorship now. So that's heavily in motion now. I think it may have to move to October just because of that corporate piece. It takes a little more time than 3 weeks to raise that kind of revenue. But the resolution has been ratified, and it should be being disseminated to all of the various states, which would include Senator Bradford. I think there's a way where your bill and this one it can work together. But
I look forward to seeing that resolution and, more importantly, passing it here in California. I mean,
that's the key. Yeah. Now, here's what I need, and I need to get your information before we go. I wrote down some of the actors and the athletes. If we can really get them behind it and working together with it, because we're doing this signature campaign, I think it'll see great momentum in California. And we need influencers around the country to get behind it.
Absolutely.
I agree.
About that.
I agree.
I'll make sure you're connected. And as we're coming to a close and preparing final remarks, I'd like Rebecca and Charles, as they're saying their final remarks, to also talk about their key takeaways, what they want us to take away from watching the film, along, with Eric, and then we'll allow our deputy chief and senator to close as well. But this is so rich. I mean, we could go on, and I believe we do need to continue this conversation. And I think we should have a reunion after we've all seen it and kind of roll up our sleeves and get to business. So thank you so much. Rebecca, tell us about what you think are some of the key takeaways, what you'd like us all viewers to walk away with. And then also make sure you include how people can stay connected to you. And then, Eric, please also make sure you let everyone know how they can see the film that will be released tomorrow.
I think the takeaway that I would like to see people walk away with is something that happened in one of the scenes where I'm addressing a crowd. It's in the trailer that the first thing I said is, we don't come here together as whites or Hispanics or Asians. I said, we come here together. We stand together as mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers of the sons that we love. And if people would have a ping in their heart that, wow, what if that were my child?
Yeah.
If we could awaken, we keep using the word empathy, but I would like to see the empathy go to a decision of change.
Yeah.
And let that affect our nation.
Thank you. So,
yeah.
How can people stay connected with you, follow you?
Yeah, I just created some public social media, so I apologize. But the Facebook is at Rebecca DiRienzo Actress. Not the most creative thing in the world. And the Instagram account is the Rebecca DiRienzo. And my daughter came up with that because she was helping me make it. So
no, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for who you are in real life and who your character is, how you portrayed that character. Just from the clip that we saw, we're just thankful and grateful and look forward to continue to engage with you. Okay, Charles.
I don't have all those platforms and stuff she's talking about. I'm on Facebook. That's about it. But when the senator was mentioning, I think he said a policeman whose son was turning 16. I got a kind of a smile because I remember when my friend Julian Bond, late Julian Bond, was in the state legislature, and he introduced a bill to up the drinking age from 18 to 21. And when he was asked about it, he said, "Why do you do that?" He said, "My daughter is 17." So sometimes we have to have some enlightened self-interest.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to introduce another piece of this pie that we need to be concerned about, and that is the courts.
Truth.
You know, there's the unjust sentencing across the board. You know how irrational the punishment for crack cocaine was as opposed to powder cocaine and all that. And if you got some extra funds in police departments, it might be good to get some citizens involved as court watchers, you know, and do some analysis of how judges are sentencing people. And you know, then use that at the time of elections. You know, people are sending folk to jail who might need to go for drug treatment instead of imprisonment.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Because that's a crucial part of the puzzle. And I was just blown away today when I heard the presidential candidate who was in what's the name of that city where the
Kenosha.
Jacob Blank was Kenosha, right? Yeah, and he mentioned that he has a commitment to making sure that public defenders make as much money as the prosecutors. I said, "Wow!" So you're gonna equal the game. You're gonna equal the board so that the person who's accused has the same quality of defense as the accusing. You know, that can make a big difference in what happens because poor folk don't get a fair shake, and the public defenders are usually paid pennies, and they're up against multi-million-dollar law firms and stuff most of the time. So I thought that was fantastic as an idea, and I hope it comes to be. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Great points. Thank you so much, Charles. All right, Eric.
Well, I thank everybody. We're probably less than 4 hours on our end now. I don't know how that works on the West Coast, but it's 9:30 or so now. So in 2.5 hours, it'll be tomorrow for us. So I think on the Vimeo on demand, this is Vimeo, Vimeo. It's another platform that we chose to use. Many of you know Vimeo from a streaming context, but they also have an on-demand platform, so they can do everything that Netflix does. So if you go, you don't have to subscribe. You go for free under Vimeo. If you have Roku, you can download Vimeo on your smart TV. But if you go to negativeexposuremovie.com on our site, you can buy right there. It'll take you to Vimeo. So any device, Android or iPhone or iPad, the handles, the website is negativeexposuremovie.com. The Instagram is neg, NEGEXP. Instagram handle is at NEGEXP. And then our Facebook is just Negative Exposure is #1 there. So we put Negative Exposure in. I need to see Deputy Chief because my staff is texting me because they want you to know about our animated series with Chief Rooster, which is a literacy series, which is a safety series with our kids. So I'd love to talk to you about that in LA. We're already working with Philadelphia. So I think, there's probably a tie in there. So offline, we'll talk about that. But again, negativeexposuremovie.com. In a few hours, it'll be kicking off the official release. A lot of people are standing up doing a 1:00 a.m. watch party. They're waiting for it. We're really excited. Thank you all. Yeah. The baby is being born. It's coming to fruition. Thank you so much, Kelly, for having us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I look
and if it's available on the East Coast at that midnight there, it should be available to us.
It should be. I don't see any reason why not,
Exactly. So we will definitely be tuning in, and we can't wait to see it. And we just thank you so much.
Thank you
Steve, Amada, anything else you'd like to say in closing? But this is just to be continued because we are going to continue this conversation and this work. It's so critical.
Without a doubt. And I just appreciate the the opinions and the voices of Mr. Black, Ms. DiRosenzo, and Bishop. You're hitting a nail right on the head as to what we need to do in this society to address the ills. And I'm so happy you mentioned the court system, because that's really outside of arresting the unjust system. I did a piece of legislation a couple years ago giving judicial discretion on gun sentencing. We found out that Black and brown people were sentenced 5 times more using enhancements because it was mandatory. Now we give judges the discretion to use their own opinion. And again, I want to quote Richard Pryor again when he was talking about justice. Usually when we went to court, it was just us. And so we just passed the bill, AB 3070 on Monday night, that gives greater diversity to the jury pool as well. And not until you have juries of your peers will you ever have a fair chance at being treated equal by the law. So those are all the things we're working on in the state of California. Kelly, thank you for this invitation. Again,
oh, absolutely.
Congratulations, Chief Tangarides, for all the work that you will have done and you will continue to do representing LAPD. And again, I look forward to watching Negative Exposure because I think it's the right movie at the right time. It's the urgency of now, as Dr. King often stated. And I'm going to encourage everybody I know to watch it. And if you want to reach me, well,
we'll do that. We'll do that. Okay. Unless you want the whole world to know.
All my stuff is public. I tell folks that all the time. Even my home number.
Okay.
My office number is 310-412-6120, 310-412-6120, and 916-651-4035. And I'm there every day, so you don't have to worry about handlers.
All right, now Senator, offline, I need a cell number.
You will have
that. Yeah. We'll do that.
For both of you, I need cell numbers, right? Okay.
You can even have my home
All
number.
right. Imada, we're gonna give you the last word, Deputy Chief.
I thank you so much. Congratulations on the film. I'm looking forward to it. You're a couple hours ahead of us, so tomorrow I'll just be like, I'm ready to watch it. Thank you for this platform, Kelly. Thank you so much. And congratulations, Rebecca and Mr. Black. Very nice to meet you. And hopefully we can continue this dialogue.
Look forward to it. Thank y'all.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Senator.
So thank you all again. To be continued. And we'll be tuning in next week for another episode of Impact Media Presents. I typically close it by myself, but we're gonna have a meeting after the meeting. So thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate your support. Go see Negative Exposure at Vimeo and go to Negative Exposure, the movie, negativeexposuremovie.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.